Welcome to Ask the Hard Questions, Season 1, Episode 18, Fruit of Insanity, the Evangelical Way. If you came for comfort, you are in the wrong place. This is not a pep talk. This is a test. We are going to run claims all the way to their logical end, and we are not going to flinch when the fruit shows up. And before we start, I am going to say this clean because people keep trying to blur it on purpose. When I say Christian, I am not talking about discipleship to Yeshua. I am talking about Pauline apostleship, the not under the law system that learned how to bless what God cursed and call it grace. Discipleship to Yeshua is not slogans. It is obedience. It is doing what the king said. It is the Father and the Son, with Moses as the witness against you, just like Yeshua said, no later voice required. Now here's the question that haunts me. If your gospel is true, why does it keep producing the same fruit? Why does it always end up protecting the powerful and crushing the poor? Why does it always end up defending Caesar with Scripture while calling God's commands bondage? And what gets me is how fast people learn to call it wisdom when it is really just fear with a church mask on. Because this episode is about fruit, not vibes, not intentions, fruit. And the fruit of the evangelical way has a history. Colonial conquest with a Bible on the belt. Native blood on the ground. Black bodies hanging while Sunday prayers float up like smoke. Asians detained, scapegoated, treated like a policy problem instead of image bearers. Hispanics hunted, families split, dignity shredded in the name of order. Same empire, same devouring, new uniforms, bigger guns, better optics, same Sunday rinse. And the part I do not get is this. How do you call yourself faithful while defending the system that crucifies the poor every week? How do you sing about the Lamb while you protect the beast that kills with paperwork, cages, and raids? How do you bow your head under Caesar's shadow and call it worship? Tonight we draw the line where Yeshua drew it. We are not jumping over the sign. We are not upgrading the king with a later system. We are going to listen to one voice, and we are going to measure everything by what he said and what he demanded. So take a breath. Drop the church reflex. Drop the slogans. Drop the fear of losing a seat. Because you cannot sit in the seat of Caesar and claim to follow the king. Let's begin. The fruit of insanity, the evangelical way. You cannot sit in the seat of Caesar and claim to follow the king. You cannot defend the church of empire and pretend to follow the Lamb who was slain by it. You cannot sing their songs on Sunday while the poor are crushed by Monday. You cannot bow your head while empire raises its guns and expect heaven to call that worship. If you need a pulpit, a paycheck, or a platform to speak truth, then you have already sold it. And what gets me is how they call it faith when it is just excuses stacked into a sanctuary. What gets me is how the same mouths that demand obedience from the poor call obedience to God legalism. The part I do not get is why their God always needs victims so the comfortable can stay comfortable. If that is the case, then why is the stranger always treated like a threat? Why is the widow always an afterthought? Why does the poor man always get preached at instead of defended? Yeshua did not hide the test. From their fruits you will know them. Matthew 7:16. Not every one saying to me, Master, Master, will enter into the kingdom of the heavens, but the one doing the will of my Father, the one in the heavens. Matthew 7:21. A hymn cannot wash blood. History is not a side topic. History is the fruit. History is the receipts. History is what the Sunday system produced when it married power. Colonial conquest with a Bible on the belt. Native massacres. Stolen land dressed up as destiny. Broken treaties followed by hymns. Children ripped from families and sent to schools designed to erase them. Names changed, languages beaten out of mouths. Then a sermon about God's providence. And what gets me is how they call that discipleship. No, it is not discipleship to Yeshua. It is Pauline apostleship, and it is a huge difference. It is a system that can devour on Saturday and sing on Sunday and still call itself righteous. And when the African was hung by the neck, lynched under a sky that heard every scream, what did the Empire Church do? They went home. They cleaned up. They ate their Sunday chicken. They bowed their heads. They thanked God for their blessings. And the part I do not get is how anyone can read this and still call that worship. Woe to you, you devour widows' houses, and for a pretense you pray long. Matthew 23:14. Then the Asian is fenced, detained, scapegoated, turned into a threat by policy and paranoia. Paperwork becomes chains. Camps become administration. Then the Hispanic is treated like contraband. Families split. Cages in deserts. Labor exploited. Dignity stripped. And pulpits debate law and order while baptizing cruelty as security. If your grace can sit beside a cage, it is not grace. It is permission. And Yeshua already told you what the nations do. You know that the rulers of the nations lord it over them, and the great ones exercise authority over them. It will not be so among you. Matthew 20:25-26. If it will not be so among you, then why are you building your whole religion around the way the nations rule? There is a line. It is not drawn in theory. It is drawn in time. It was carved into history by the mouth of the only one who will judge the living and the dead. No sign will be given to it except the sign of Jonah. Matthew 12:39. And what gets me is how people leap over that line like it is nothing. Like the king spoke, and then we all went shopping for a later voice to override him. If that is the case, then why did Yeshua treat Jonah as the boundary? Why did he treat it as the sign? Why do you need a later ladder when the Father already spoke and the Son already spoke? Do not think that I will accuse you to the Father. The one accusing you is Moses, in whom you have hoped. For if you were believing Moses, you would be believing me, for that one wrote about me. But if you do not believe his writings, how will you believe my words? John 5:45-47. Father and Son, with Moses as the witness against you, just like Yeshua said. One voice only. No later voice required. If you need a later voice to cancel the earlier voice, you already chose your master. Everything after Jonah must bow to that voice or be exposed. That includes Paul. That includes wolves in robes. That includes your pastor, your traditions, and your favorite Bible app. If it blesses what God cursed, if it calls the law a curse, if it pits Yeshua against Moses, it is not of God. It is the whore. It is the system. It is Mystery Babylon. And Babylon does not rest on Saturdays. And what gets me is how they can quote heaven while ignoring the least. Truly I say to you, inasmuch as you did it to one of these, the least of my brothers, you did it to me. Matthew 25:40. If you crush the poor, you strike the king. And if that is not the king, then who are you following? God's law is not a curse. The Sabbath is not optional. Protecting the poor is not legalism. What gets me is how the Sunday system treats mercy like a hobby, justice like a side quest, and obedience like an insult. If that is the case, then why does the faith they preach always end with the poor still crushed and the powerful still blessed? Not judging unjustly, not lifting up face of poor, and face of great not honoring. In righteousness you will judge your neighbor. Leviticus 19:15. If afflicting you afflict him, if crying he cries to me, hearing I will hear his cry. Exodus 22:23. He does justice of orphan and widow, and he loves stranger, giving to him bread and garment, and you will love the stranger. Deuteronomy 10:18-19. And the part I do not get is how anyone can read that and still call God's law a curse. How do you call the commands that protect the crushed bondage, while you call the laws of men that crush them wisdom? He who turns away his ear from hearing law, also his prayer is abomination. Proverbs 28:9. That is not my opinion. That is God saying your prayers can become filth when your ears refuse his commands. And what gets me is how they want God's name on their lips and Caesar's power in their hands. They want Yeshua for the songs and Caesar for the policies. They want the lamb for the stage and the beast for Monday. No one is able to serve two masters. Matthew 6:24. You are not able to serve God and mammon. Matthew 6:24. If you can serve God and the empire at the same time, you are not serving God. You are serving a blend. And a blend is exactly how Babylon survives. And what gets me is how the Sunday system trains people to call obedience extreme the moment it costs comfort. If that is the case, then why did Yeshua say this? If you love me, you will keep my commandments. John 14:15. Why do you call me Master, Master, and you do not do what I say? Luke 6:46. He who has my commandments and keeps them, that one is the one loving me. John 14:21. Doing, keeping, obeying, that is the language, not posturing, not branding, not stage sincerity. And then he draws the boundary around the nations and their power games. You know that the rulers of the nations lord it over them, and the great ones exercise authority over them. It will not be so among you. Matthew 20:25-26. It will not be so among you. So why is it exactly so among you? Why does your religion always drift toward domination, toward hierarchy, toward threats, toward coercion, toward submit, toward control? Why does it keep reproducing the nations inside the assembly? Beware from the false prophets who come to you in sheep clothing, but inwardly they are ravenous wolves. Matthew 7:15. From their fruits you will know them. Matthew 7:16. Ravenous wolves do not stop being wolves because they learned worship chords. And what gets me is how the Sunday system can devour widows and still feel holy. Woe to you, you devour widows' houses, and for a pretense you pray long. Matthew 23:14. If your worship devours widows and still feels holy, your altar is a crime scene. And the part I do not get is how they can keep screaming revival while refusing the one thing God keeps demanding, justice that actually touches the ground. I want mercy and not sacrifice. Matthew 9:13. Blessed the merciful, because they will receive mercy. Matthew 5:7. What gets me is how they love the word blessed until the blessed people show up. And Yeshua tells you exactly how judgment works. I hungered, and you gave me to eat. I thirsted, and you gave me to drink. I was stranger, and you gathered me. Matthew 25:35. Truly I say to you, inasmuch as you did it to one of these, the least of my brothers, you did it to me. Matthew 25:40. Inasmuch as you did not do it to one of the least of these, you did not do it to me. Matthew 25:45. If you crush the poor, you strike the king. So how do you say you love him while you defend the system that harms his least? How do you sit in the seat of Caesar and claim to follow the king? And then Yeshua gives the verdict on the final day, and it is not complicated. Many will say to me in that day, Master, Master. And then I will declare to them, I never knew you. Depart from me, the ones working lawlessness. Matthew 7:22-23. The part I do not get is why people hear that and still think the issue is belief. The king said lawlessness, working lawlessness. That is a practice. That is fruit. And what gets me is how the Sunday system keeps calling lawlessness freedom. Then it turns around and weaponizes the law against outsiders while claiming exemption for themselves. Grace for me, law for thee. Mercy for me, judgment for thee. That is not discipleship to Yeshua. It is Pauline apostleship, and it is a huge difference. And now let us talk about the rapture escape mythology, because it is not innocent. It is the dream that lets people ignore their neighbor. It is the fantasy that says we do not have to fix anything because we are leaving. What gets me is how convenient that is for the ones doing the harming. A gospel that trains you to abandon the crushed is not good news. It is abandonment dressed in prophecy. We are going to cover all the letters of Paul in detail this year, so come back when you can. And here is the line again, the line that ends the beast with one voice. No sign will be given to it except the sign of Jonah. Matthew 12:39. Father and Son, with Moses as the witness against you. No later voice required, no second ladder required, no Roman permission slip required. The questions are the blade. The questions are the alarm. The questions are mercy that wakes you up before your conscience goes numb. So ask them until the spell breaks. If God's law that protects the poor is called a curse, why do the laws of men that crush the poor get called holy? If the Sabbath was made for man, why does the Sunday system erase the day God made holy? If love is keeping commandments, why does love disappear when obedience costs comfort? If Yeshua said, "It will not be so among you," why is Gentile lordship the blueprint of your religious life? If your worship can coexist with cages, what gospel are you preaching? If your altar can devour widows and still feel clean, who is washing it? And if you still sit with Babylon, why are you shocked you share her fruits? Come out from her, my people, so that you do not share in her sins, and so that you do not receive from her plagues. Revelation 18:4. If you are still in her house, you are still in her curse. So build a gathering, not for optics, not for a tax break, not for a stage, for the King, on the day he set apart, with the poor as the first line item, widow, stranger, prisoner, exhausted, hunted. Feed them, protect them, advocate for them, share resources, refuse partiality, refuse empire lordship, refuse Pauline apostleship disguised as discipleship, because the thesis is simple and it will not be negotiated. God's law that protects the poor is a curse, but the law of men that crushes them is God. Start there or stop pretending. Ask the hard questions. #EricSeeksTruth. And that is where we end tonight. And I hope you now see why I keep coming back to the same place. Not because I ran out of topics, but because the beast keeps repeating itself with new uniforms. Different decade, same devil deal. Same Sunday rinse, same Monday violence, same blessed language over cursed fruit. And what gets me is how people keep acting like this is complicated. It is not complicated. A tree is not measured by its choir. A tree is measured by its fruit. A tree is measured by who gets fed and who gets crushed. You can tell me all day that your intentions are pure. You can tell me your heart is sincere. You can tell me your pastor means well. But if the system you defend keeps producing the same harm, then you are not defending God. You are defending a machine that learned how to talk like God. And the part I don't get is how disciples can watch empire chew people up and still think neutrality is holy? How do you watch the widow get devoured and call silence wisdom? How do you watch the stranger get hunted and call it order? How do you watch the poor drown and call your sanctuary upgrade stewardship? How do you sit under the shadow of Caesar and pretend you are following the king who warned you about the nations and their lordship? Because that is the line, and it is not drawn in theory. It is drawn in time. It is drawn in the actual history of what you defended. It is drawn in what you excused. It is drawn in who you kept calling threat while you called your own people blessed. Native blood in the soil while sermons float over stolen land. Black bodies swinging while Sunday tables are set. Asians fenced and scapegoated while the stage sings love. Hispanic families split while the pulpit baptizes cruelty as security. Same empire, same devouring, same polished religion. And when you point it out, they do not repent. They manage the optics. They rebrand. They call you divisive. They call you legalistic. They call you angry. They call you everything except what Yeshua called them: wolves. And what gets me is how quickly people forget that wolves do not become sheep because they learned the language of the flock. So hear me. This is not a speech about politics. This is a speech about loyalty. This is about who you serve when it costs you something. This is about who you follow when it threatens your comfort. This is about whether you will obey the king or keep renting a seat in Babylon because it has air conditioning, a parking lot, and a playlist. And the part I don't get is how people can claim they love God while calling his commands bondage. How do you claim you love the king while you resent his order? How do you claim you love the poor while you defend the system that keeps crushing them? How do you claim you love the stranger while you excuse policies that treat them like contraband? If obedience is always too much for you, then you don't have a gospel problem. You have a Lord problem. Because the moment you defend the Church of Empire, you are confessing who you fear. The moment you excuse the system, you are confessing who you serve. The moment you pick your seat over the Sabbath, you are confessing what you worship. And that is why these episodes keep connecting. Because every episode is the same test from a different angle. We talked about wolves and how they move. We talked about how threats are fruit. We talked about how intimidation is not holiness. We talked about how comfort is an idol that always demands a sacrifice, and the sacrifice is always the vulnerable. We talked about how fake peace is just a treaty that protects the predator. We talked about how faith alone becomes a license to keep your teeth dripping while still calling yourself clean. We talked about how the Sunday system rinses conscience, not behavior. We talked about how empire disciples people into silence and then calls that silence discernment. It all stacks. It all points to one question. If your religion can coexist with the crushed, what spirit is driving it? Because the king did not give you a foggy standard, he gave you a visible one. When the hungry are still hungry, your revival is theater. When the widow is still devoured, your worship is noise. When the stranger is still hunted, your love is marketing. When the poor are still crushed, your blessing is a lie. And I'm going to say it straight. Discipleship to Yeshua is not compatible with defending Caesar's house while pretending you are building the kingdom. And what gets me is how people keep searching for complicated answers when the simplest answer is standing in front of them. You can't serve two masters. You can't wear the lamb's name while carrying the beast's water. You can't sing mercy while excusing cruelty. You can't call commandments a curse and still claim you are following the king who obeyed the Father all the way through. So here is the call. and it is not soft. Stop laundering blood with songs. Stop hiding cowardice behind grace. Stop calling compromise balance. Stop calling empire God's instrument. Stop calling law obedience legalism while you bow to the laws of men. Stop defending the Sunday system that trains you to tolerate evil as long as it is polite. If you sit with them, you are with them. If you stand with them, you are them. If you excuse them, you join them. If you won't separate, you have already chosen. And that is why the Sabbath matters. Not as a badge, not as a hobby, not as a vibe, as separation, as refusal, as a weekly line in the sand that says, I will not be discipled by the nations. I will not bow to their lordship. I will not call their violence holy. I will not bless what God cursed. Build something real, not a brand, not a stage, not a tax shelter, a gathering with a spine. Gather on the day God set apart. Put the poor first. Put the widow first. Put the stranger first. Put the prisoner first. Put justice first. Put mercy on the ground, not just in the mouth. And if that scares you, then you should finally admit what has been discipling you. Because the beast survives on one fuel: people who know better but prefer comfort. And this year, we are not dodging the big questions. We are going to take the letters everyone uses as an escape hatch and put them on the table. We are going to read them slow. We are going to compare them to the voice of the King. We are going to watch what aligns and what doesn't. And when the contradictions show up, we are not going to flinch, because truth does not need spin. So don't come back for entertainment. Come back for separation. Come back for obedience. Come back for the hard questions that snap the spell and expose the fruit. Ask the hard questions.